2019 African Economic Outlook. This is the AFDB. It was released earlier, but I got into it yesterday in a much bigger way. The president, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, said Africa's general economic performance continues to improve, GDP reaching an estimated 3.5% in 2018, about the same as in 2017, and up 1.4 percentage points from the 2.1% in 2016. Looking forward, African economic growth is projected to accelerate to 4% in 2019 and 4.1% in 2020. While higher than that of other emerging and developing countries, it remains insufficient to address the structural challenges of persistent current and fiscal deficits and debt vulnerability. The challenge is thus twofold: to raise the current growth path and to increase the efficiency of growth in generating employment. However, African economies have deindustrialized. Structural change is occurring. It has been through the rise of the services sector, which has been largely dominated by informality, low productivity, and an inability to create quality jobs. East Africa led, with GDP growth estimated at 5.7% in 2018, followed by North Africa at 4.9%, where Egypt is leading the charge, West Africa at 3.3%, Central Africa at 2.2%, and Southern Africa at 1.2%. Nigeria and South Africa, half of sub-Saharan African GDP, big drag. Between 2010 and 2018, growth averaged almost 6%, with Djibouti, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Tanzania recording above average rate growth. Several countries, Burundi and Comoros, growth remains weak due to political uncertainty. Inflation fell from 12.6% in 2017 to 10.9% in 2018 and is projected to further decline to 8.1% in 2020. Remittances continue to gain momentum and dominate the other components of capital flows at $69 billion in 2017, almost double the size of portfolio investments. Official development assistance peaked in 2013 at $52 billion, since declined to $45 billion in 2017. By the end of 2017, gross government debt to GDP ratio reached 53% in Africa. Africa's working age population is projected to increase from 705 million in 2018 to almost 1 billion by 2030. Millions of young people join the labor market. The pressure to provide decent jobs will intensify. At the current rate of labor force growth, Africa needs to create 12 million new jobs every year to prevent unemployment from rising. Africa has the highest rate of estimated informality in the world at 72% of non-agriculture employment, and as high as 90% in some countries. Growth acceleration episodes are also associated with the rise of employment in the mining sector, 10 out of 20 episodes, confirming the specific role of the extractive sector in Africa. A borderless Africa is the foundation of a competitive continental market that could serve as a global business center. 40% of African countries projected to see growth of at least 5% in 2019, about 25% projected to see growth of less than 3%. Nigeria and South Africa dampening Africa's average growth. They account for a large share of Africa's GDP, but only 0.2 to 0.4 percentage points of Africa's GDP. Egypt, the third largest African economy, accounts for more than 1 percentage point of Africa's growth, so twice, if not more, Nigeria and South Africa. Talking about the domestic resource mobilization being key, remittance increases, saying the composition of African debt has shifted away from official and concessional foreign debt towards commercial debt, which has greater service costs. External debt service as a proportion of exports increased from 5% in 2013 to 10% in 2016, saying there are indications that Africa is experiencing premature deindustrialization. This I found interesting. The analysis reveals little firm dynamism in Africa, particularly for small firms' chances of transitioning into medium and large firms. This is a photograph of the President of the African Development Bank with President Buhari, former President Obasanjo, at the inauguration ceremony of President Macky Sall. Since 2000, apparel exports from the southern and East African regions have accelerated, driven by preferential trade access through the US AGOA Act. I've said previously that a sub-Saharan African economist has also got to be an accomplished meteorologist because rains have an outsized effect on GDP. They cited one of the risks as being the weather, which is quite correct. Referencing the youth demographic they speak about, many characterize it as a demographic dividend, but for beautiful Blaise Compaoré, it turned into a demographic terminator. African growth is at a 7-year high, no thanks to its major economies. GDP growth, as the FDB said, is set to accelerate to 4% this year, despite Nigeria and South Africa, which make up almost half of the continent's GDP, pulling down Africa's average growth. Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania all feature on the AFDB's list of 10 fastest growing economies for 2019. Egypt, the biggest economy after Nigeria and South Africa, will also help drive growth. This is an image of the Africa's 10 fastest growing economies from Paul Wallace, and this is an image of the 10 slowest growing economies from Paul Wallace.